بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Before I introduce the new characteristic, there needs to be a precursor to it, and that is to understand ourselves and the concept of what's called jihad al-nafs. We as human beings were created in a way where we love ourselves. This is to be very frank and honest. We love ourselves. And that's part of our survival, right? In order to take care of ourselves, in order to achieve, to accomplish, to pursue, to take care of our family, right? We need to have this sense of feeling towards what we feel is in our best interest and protect it. So when it comes to, for example, preserving our life, we will go above and beyond, right? When it comes to preserving our wealth, we will go above and beyond to make sure that it's preserved. So we are created in that way. Part of which, is al-hawa, desires. It's innate in us. It's inherited. We inherit this genes, if you will, this emotion. As soon as we're born, we have desires. Children, babies, infants, who can barely understand ABC, have a desire, right? They like milk, they like water, they like doing things. And if you take it away from them, they get upset. Well, that's their desire in play, right? So jihad in nafs is important, and it's also difficult. Why? Because a lot of it is actually challenging your own desires, your own selves. What you perceive to be a want or a like, or something you are attached to or loved, right? Part of iman and increasing one's faith and spirituality or connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to challenge that. And to give an example of that is Umar radiallahu anhu. He told the Prophet ﷺ, being very honest. The companions were very honest with the Prophet ﷺ. Right? He told him, Umar radiallahu anhu told the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, I love you more than everything except myself. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ said, no, you won't have true iman until you love me more than you love yourself. So in one narration, he kind of goes and comes back and says, Ya Rasulullah, I love you more than myself. So the Prophet ﷺ responds, now you have iman. And this is interesting. It's very hard to process in our minds. Why is it so important? Someone like Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, who was willing to go to sacrifice his life for the Prophet ﷺ, for Islam. He did not attain true iman, right? Strong iman that's ingrained, embedded in his heart, until he loved the Prophet ﷺ more than he loved himself. Why? Because if we love ourselves more than the Prophet ﷺ, that is a major barrier between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I love myself more than I love the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that means if I am challenged between something that I love that is contradictory to something that the Prophet ﷺ is telling me, whether it's an obligation or a mustahab act or staying away from a makruh or that which is forbidden. Well, if I love myself more, then more strength is going to be for what? I'm more likely going to act upon what? What I want. So we cannot truly embody iman until we're able to overcome ourselves, our ego, which unfortunately Western society inflates so much. People's ego are so large, right? But since we present ourselves in a very polite way, in a quote-unquote humble manner, it kind of disguises it. But when push comes to shove, Westerners are really tested with ego. It's there. And it comes out truly on issues of faith. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, don't do this, why can't I do that? No, it needs to make sense in my mind in order for me to accept it. If it doesn't make sense, that means it's wrong. I can't accept it. Well, did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? Yes, but no. He must have meant something else. Well, there's another possibility. That our egos are so inflated that it blinds us to the truth. And that's a reality. And that's part of jihad of the self. So this is kind of a preface for this attribute. Because in order to truly embody this attribute, we need to get over ourselves. Because this attribute is generosity. The Prophet ﷺ was the most generous. And generosity is quite important when it comes to iman and when it comes to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we will come to shortly, inshallah. And Imam Ahmad radiallahu anhu, rahmatullah alayh, the great Imam, the spiritualist, the Zahid, says that he gathered with a group of, the pious people, and they discussed issues, and they came to an agreement that someone who is stingy will never be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They could be a believer, but they'll never be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because stinginess is a thick barrier between us and loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and coming close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we will get to inshallah. So we need to overcome ourselves. And by the way, this isn't something that is unique to some people, and some people don't have this. On the contrary, what you find is that the Quran even talks to prophets in this regard. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya Dawood, inna ja'alnaka khalifatan fil ard fahkum bayna an-nasi bil haqq wa la tattabi' al-hawa. O Dawood, the great king, the prophet, the one who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises in the Quran many times, and talks about the prestige that he had, the might that he had. His voice was so beautiful that birds would chirp along with him. Subhanallah. Ya jibalu awwibi ma'ahu. Even the mountains, would be affected by his recitation and even follow it in a way that we cannot perceive. That's who he was, alayhi salatu wassalam. But despite that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya Dawood, we made you a successor on this earth. You are the caliph. You are the leader. You are the superpower now. You are the most powerful individual on the face of this planet. فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ بِالْحَقِّ. Judge between people in truth, and don't follow your desires. He's telling Dawood alayhi salatu wassalam. He had this in him. Of course, as a prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him a massive amount of guidance. And we are capable of receiving just as much guidance. Right? We will never be a prophet, we will never be as good as prophets, but we are capable of attaining guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and protection. It wasn't just that he was a prophet who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose that made him protected to that extent. Rather, it was the way he applied the faith, the overcoming of these challenges, the letting go of the ego, recognizing that there's more to life than myself. I am not the center of the world. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him that. Likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَغُضُّونَ أَصْوَاتَهُمْ عِنْدَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ امْتَحَنَ اللَّهُ قُلُوبَهُمْ لِلتَّقْوَى. Those who lower their voice in front of the Prophet ﷺ in his presence, these are the people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has tested their heart for taqwa. Meaning, it is a good sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of moves our hearts, challenges our hearts with certain tests so that we attain taqwa. Taqwa is not going to come just by reading books. It's important to seek knowledge, and we spoke about knowledge last week, and it is crucial to iman and to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But knowledge is theoretical. Unless you have circumstances which allows you to understand its application, right? You can read about tawakkul day in and day out. But if you don't go through a test, you will never know how it feels or how to apply it. Also, you need to go through hardships in order to truly experience how tawakkul can help you out. So knowledge is half of the game, and the other half is actually experiencing it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that those who lower their voice out of respect, out of reverence of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, recognizing his status and who he is, these are people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has tested their hearts to truly bring out their iman. And in our times today, yes, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam isn't amongst us. However, we can still apply that when we hear his name. So we always say what? Alayhi salatu wassalam. When a hadith, an authentic hadith, is presented, right, and it's explained the way scholars explained it. So there are two conditions here. It's authentic hadith, and the understanding is the way the scholars understood it. Some people will present a weak hadith, right, and it creates chaos. What did the Prophet ﷺ really say this? No way he said this, and when it creates problems. Or sometimes it's authentic hadith, but the person explaining it doesn't know what they're talking about, and it creates problems. So if an authentic hadith is presented in an authentic manner, then it is upon us to lower our voice, or at least respect the Prophet ﷺ and what he's saying. We might not be able to apply it, right? Applying it, again, is another challenge. But at least acknowledge that this is the truth, even if I am weak and I cannot apply it. Even if I have certain challenges in my life that make it difficult for me to apply it. Even if there are certain desires in my heart that challenging my ability to apply what the Prophet ﷺ say, at least I accept it. At least I say, yes, this is the truth. And I'll do my best to, be among those who apply it in their lives. This is taqwa, right? And what we have been tested with today in the West is luxury and wealth. We might not all be millionaires, but you know what? The lifestyles that we are living is equivalent, if not more lavish than the kings of pre-modern times. Think about it. A king might have a castle, right? But in order to cool himself down, or herself, the queen, they needed some servant to go and kind of blow the fan. And how effective is that? We have AC, central AC. That's a big luxury. Many of us own our own home. How many people owned their own home back then? We have insurance and all these things that allow us to live an independent life. Why did people back in the day live close to one another? Live in their tribe, within their tribe. Live within a quarter, right? Why? Because they needed one another. If something happened, they needed the help of their family members in order to, live. But with insurance and all these things and cars and transportation and all this stuff, right? It's given us the ability to live independent, lavish lives. We have been tested. Inshallah, we will succeed in the test with wealth. And that is a big responsibility. So it is important for us to really explore the generosity of the Prophet ﷺ and understand the dynamics. Where does it fit into my own relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And I'll do my best, inshallah, to try and present that in a way that's effective for our times. But to start, let's start off with kind of seeing the Prophet ﷺ in action. So the companions narrate that كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أحسن الناس وأشجع الناس وأجود الناس. The Prophet ﷺ was the best of people. The way he looked was the best. When he is described, his face is described as being like the full moon. His teeth were white, right? He smelled very good. His clothes were nice. And he was among the most courageous of people. And he was among the most generous of people. And by the way, it seems to be a link between generosity and courage, right? There seems to be a link between generosity and courage. Someone who's more courageous is more likely to be generous. And someone who trains themselves to be generous is more likely to be courageous. Because part of that generosity is kind of not knowing what to expect after giving, after sacrificing, right? And that's an attribute of courage. And towards the end of his life, after the Battle of Hunain, the Prophet ﷺ, a lot of people became Muslim, they're new Muslims. So in order to kind of attract them more to Islam and show them, what Islam has to offer them, the Prophet ﷺ gave a lot of wealth to these new Muslims. So one of these individuals says, so the hadith says, إن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أعطى يوم حنين أناسا من الطلقاء ليتألف قلوبهم على الإسلام. أعطاهم 10,000 من الإبل وكان من جملة من أعطى مالك بن عوف فامتدحه بقصيدة. So here the Prophet ﷺ, as I just mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ gave him so much wealth to the point where this individual goes back to his tribe and says, "O my people, become Muslim, because Muhammad ﷺ يعطي عطاء من لا يخشى الفقر." He gives wealth the way a person who doesn't fear poverty gives. Meaning it seems like he has an endless wealth, an endless amount of wealth to get, and that's the way he gives. And that's very important, as I will get to, inshallah. Also, generosity is part of ihsan. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands justice, and He commands us to be muhsinin, to really excel in what we do, to be the best in what we do, regardless of the field. Part of ihsan is doing favors for others. And what greater favor can you do for someone than give him a little bit of wealth, right? And it said that the Prophet ﷺ was never asked except that he would give. He was never asked and would reply with a no. This is really interesting. It's really interesting, especially when you deal with people, right? And this is something, going a little tangent, I saw in my teacher that I haven't seen in anyone else. I always mention my teacher, but I have to because, he has a big place in my heart. And I was always shocked, like amazed at how he would give. Like to the extent where it's almost an intuition in him. One time we were walking, I forgot where, and this guy, a very old guy, elderly guy with a orange beard, he dyed his beard orange. He's walking. I don't think he was an Arab. I think he was a foreigner. And this guy kind of with his cane says, kind of calling my sheikh. And immediately he takes 20 dinar out of his pocket and gives it to him. Without him saying anything. And I was shocked. And the old guy's like, Jazakallah khair, Jazakallah khair. He picked it up immediately. Why? It's almost as if it's intuition. And it's very important. It's said that in the analogy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives in Surah Al-Ra'd about the valley. أنزل من السماء ماء فسالت أودية بقدرها فاحتمل السيل زبدا رابيا. There's an analogy given in Surah Al-Ra'd in about verse 10, 11, 12, 13, somewhere around there, about a valley, how it rains. When it rains, the water accumulates in the valley and it becomes a stream and it purifies the land. So the rain comes and it cleans the land. And the water, when it's running, it purifies itself. And the water is Islam, it's revelation. And the valley is the heart. The valley is the heart of someone. And the bigger a person's heart is, the more revelation it can hold. So the bigger the valley, the more water it can retain. And the bigger the heart, the more knowledge it can retain as well. So what you find in our scholars, they're almost always extremely generous. They are very generous people. They have to have big hearts in order to carry that responsibility. Now, you might look to yourself and say, man, I don't have that big of a heart. But that's okay because we can expand our hearts. No one is set, no one is doomed to have weak iman. Or no one is born with the privilege of good iman. We can always train, and that's the beauty of Islam. That's why it's so beneficial for our hearts to be attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because there's always opportunity. We all have an equal chance at being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why it's so important that we center our lives around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we can only fail ourselves. We will not be failed by someone else or something else. Allah will never fail us. Allah will never cease to exist. Right? Allah will always be there. And therefore, if we're centered around Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's always something to aspire to attain. And it's important. And generosity helps expand our hearts. Because it is ihsan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah yuhibbul muhsinin. Allah loves those who are, muhsinin, who have this excellence, right? Who have this altruistic nature. He loves those kind of people. And what more do we want than the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So now we'll transition into the spirituality of generosity. What's really going on, right? There are so many verses in the Quran that promote sadaqah, charity. Zakah is an obligation. It's a pillar of the faith. And the verses that talk about sadaqah and charity are many. And the hadith that talk about charity are many. And the reward that comes with charity is so much that we cannot just pass it by. Well, there's a reason why. And take this as a rule. The more the Quran talks about something, the more quality of the reward that comes with that action, the more important it is to our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the fact that zakah is a pillar of Islam and sadaqah is so highly promoted and so beautifully elaborated on and expressed in the Quran and hadith, right, means that it's very important to our iman. So what's really going on? What are the dynamics of generosity? Generosity is about what? It is about sacrificing something that is dear to you for something that you expect nothing in return. Right? Money is dear to us. And that's the reality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا. Right? You love wealth a great amount. It's not just, I like wealth, if I have the opportunity to have a little bit of wealth, $1 million, it's okay, right? I'll take it, it's okay. The reply is, heck yeah, I want $1 million. We all aspire towards it, right? There's no one, even at a young age, man, I wish I had $1 million. I want to become a millionaire, right? It's part of who we are as human beings, right? But when we give up that wealth, it's really a leap of faith. It's generosity. You are sacrificing. That's what's going on. You are sacrificing something that is beloved to you. Now, from a rational perspective, put spirituality aside right now. From a purely rational perspective, right? Generosity is illogical. From a purely rational perspective, generosity is illogical. It doesn't make sense. If our goal is to please ourselves, to strengthen ourselves, to accomplish ourselves, to establish ourselves, then generosity is the exact opposite of that. And even scholars, admit this. They say this. They say sadaqa dararun mahd. Sadaqah is a pure harm. When they talk about mu'amalat, not spirituality. When they're talking about transaction, money transaction. And they say this in the chapter on orphans, talking about orphans, and the guardian of an orphan, and what they are responsible for when it comes to their wealth, the wealth of an orphan. They said the guardian of an orphan is not allowed to give part of the orphan's money in charity. Why? Because it's not in their best interest. And the guardian must only act upon what's in their best interest. Does that make sense? So from a purely rational perspective, generosity, sacrificing, is a harm for the individual, and therefore it's illogical. However, studies show something else today. Studies show something very interesting today, and that is studies show that people who donate more when their emotions become connected to the cause. Meaning, charity, it's not a rational process, it's an emotional process. And the evidence for that is when our hearts, our emotions become attached, they feel for a certain cause, we are more likely to donate. That's why when you go to charities and whatnot, what do they always show us, right? They show us the orphan, right? They show us the poor individual. They show us the situation, that lady who's crying. Why? Because it arouses our emotions and it forces us to feel what those people are feeling. There is a cause at hand. If I don't feel connected to that cause, it's hard for me to give. But if I feel that connection, the emotional connection, then I'm more likely to give. And studies show this. So generosity is an emotional process. And this is crucial to our iman because our relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is part rational, but it's also emotional. It's heavily influenced by our emotions. The more our emotions are attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more we are able to utilize our physical actions, utilize our dua to actually come closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says what? قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. The believers have succeeded, those who have khushu' in their prayer. What is khushu'? Right? Khushu' tends to be translated as fear or humbleness. But in my opinion, khushu' is much broader than that. Khushu' is a type of emotional attachment. Right? There's an emotional attachment to the prayer itself. And therefore, when I say Allahu Akbar, it's not just words that I'm saying because the fuqaha told me it's part of, it's a pillar of the faith, or a pillar of prayer, if it's takbiratul ihram, or it's a obligation in prayer when we switch our positions. No, but when I say Allahu Akbar, I start remembering the glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I say Sami Allahu liman hamida, Allah answers the one who praises Him. I start thinking about what? How much Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can benefit me. I don't mean that we take advantage of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or that our relationship to Him is only because, hey, He's benefiting us. That's not what I mean. But when we see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us in this life, it causes us to love Him more. And it's so beautiful when you see your dua answered. It is amazing. And it gives you the sensation, man, I wish all my dua was answered, because it brings me this joy, this attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's so beautiful, right? So it's an emotional thing, and therefore, since generosity is an emotional process, it opens many doors to help strengthen our relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, part of the dynamics of generosity is, as I mentioned, the focus becomes on what? Something or someone else. It takes the focus off the self and places it on someone or something else, right? And subhanAllah, again, studies are showing the importance of taking the focus off yourself, not thinking about yourself, thinking about other things, right? And there are other studies which I will, inshallah, quote in a little bit. So you can see how the dynamics are working. Generosity is an emotional practice. It kind of melts the heart. That's what we need before becoming generous. Our hearts need to kind of feel for what we're doing. It needs to have that khushu' in what we're about to do, that reason, that purpose, why we are doing it, that feeling, I am part of this effort. I am part of this person who is hurting. I am part of this ill person who is suffering. I am part of this people who are being oppressed. And you have those emotions kind of build up, and you can see how that fits into the hadith, the well-known hadith of that the Muslims are like one body, or are like a wall that pulls itself together, or kind of strengthens itself, right? If one person is suffering, that is my suffering as well. I need to step up to the plate. So, moving on, one of the ways generosity really establishes a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and kind of strengthens it, is that to give, as I mentioned before, you're not expecting anything in return. You are sacrificing something without, predicting or without, having anything in mind that's going to come back to you. It's different than trade, for example. I am trading, right? I'm in business. I'm buying a stock. Why am I buying that stock? Because I expect profit. I'm predicting that it's going to benefit me sooner or later. Why do I go to this job, right? Waking up in the morning is a hassle, and commuting, if you commute, and working all these hours and going through the fatigue and whatnot. Well, we do that because there's a paycheck at the end of the week or end of 2 weeks, right? So there's a benefit. But when it's charity, you're giving, and that's just, a red in your ledger, red in your bank account. That's what it is from a logical perspective. So when we do that, it must manifest, it must come with tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also husnul dhan billah. In order to do this, there needs to be an amount of tawakkul, dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a good opinion of Allah. And we know how important these two things are. أَنَا عِنْدَ حُسْنِ ظَنِّ عَبْدِي بِي. I am as my servant thinks of me. When we give something as Muslims, right, what comes to our mind? When we give charity, what really motivates us? Why are we doing that? You all know it. Reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not just that, before the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's something else that we're waiting for, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises that He's going to replace what we spend. And maybe even more, right? That's what's on our mind. But do we know when? Do we know how? Do we know where? So it's kind of like a leap of faith. If we don't have tawakkul on Allah, if we don't have this good opinion in Him, we wouldn't do that. But we have this trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that yes, I know if I give, Allah is going to give me back. And the more tawakkul a person has on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the better opinion they have of Him, right? The more likely they're going to give. So look at Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhu. Look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How much they used to give. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was ajwad in-nas, the most generous of people, وَأَجْوَدْ مَا يَكُونَ فِي رَمَضَانِ. And he was the most generous one in Ramadan. He was like a strong wind, and how generous he was. It's as if money was flying from him left and right, even though he had very little, right? Where's that coming from? His opinion in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his tawakkul on Allah. And this manifests, you can see also in Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. He comes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with all his wealth, right? Here's all my wealth. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, and what have you left for your family? He said, Allah wa Rasul. Allah and His Messenger. What does that mean? I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to replace what I gave. Umar radiallahu anhu comes and gives half, right? Before Abu Bakr. Then he says, I will never compete with Abu Bakr again. I can't. But you see how the more tawakkul a person has, the better opinion they have of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more likely they're going to give. The easier it is, the more willing, the more they want to give. And this is really important. It's also important for us to instill this feeling in our kids. Now, right? A person might not have that strong tawakkul. They might, when a push comes to shove, it's time to donate, and the fundraisers are happening, or you get the mail from Islamic Relief or one of these organizations, and it's time to give, and man, I'm starting to calculate in my mind and whatnot. You know what? Maybe this year I shouldn't, right? But how do we build that tawakkul? Well, part of it is actually being generous. Because when you're generous, you give. Now you are opening an opportunity for yourself to see the results of your actions. So you kind of see how this works both ways. The more tawakkul a person has on Allah, the more likely they'll give. But the more they give, the more it will strengthen their tawakkul, because they will see how it manifests, the blessings manifest itself in that individual's life. And this is very important. If you want tawakkul, you have to see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. And part of seeing that is doing, experiencing, as I mentioned in the beginning, right? Taking that leap of faith, as they say, going through that hardship, taking that challenge, right? Going above and beyond yourself. So, tawakkul is very important, and it's about our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also. When we sacrifice, who do we sacrifice for? If a random person comes to you and says, hey, so-and-so, you know what, can you give me $20? Are you likely to give them? Maybe, but most likely not. But if your best friend comes to you and says, hey, you know what, can you loan me $20? So, here you go. Don't worry about it, just don't give it back to me. My treat, right? Why is that? Because we are more likely to sacrifice for someone we love versus someone we don't love. So when we sacrifice our wealth, when we are generous, it is a sign of love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and loyalty to Him. And that's also very important in Iman, right? Many of us donate. In fact, probably all of us donate, small or large, depending on our financial capabilities. But how many of us actually sit and contemplate, you know what? When I do this, I'm actually expressing my love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many of us actually, this comes to their mind? Very little. Very few. How many people say, you know what, when I'm doing this, it's tawakkul. I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to help me. It might cross our mind even for a little bit. But it's very important to know that. To feel this, to experience this love when you donate. Donating is not just paper money being put into the donation box. Now I'm doing this because I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because I want to express my loyalty to Him. This is an enhanced, engagement in this thing called generosity, in this concept called generosity. So the Prophet ﷺ, it's narrated that مَا سُئِلَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ عَلَى الْإِسْلَامِ شَيْئًا إِلَّا أَعْطَاهُ قال فجاءه رجل فأعطاه غنما بين جبلين فرجع إلى قومه فقال يا قوم أسلموا فإن محمدا يعطي عطاء لا يخشى الفاقة. And this hadith is in Muslim, the one I mentioned before. This person goes to his people and says, become Muslim. Because this person is someone who gives in a way that he does not fear poverty. What does that mean to this individual? So when a non-Muslim is looking at Muslims and they see them throwing their wealth, right, giving, that says a lot. Like this Bedouin realized from the Prophet ﷺ, this person is giving in a way, right, that shows this person has backup from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This person is giving in a way that shows me that this person is being backed, being funded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. Because who gives in a way that they don't fear poverty or financial stress? Who gives like that? None of us. So the fact that Prophet ﷺ is giving like that is a form of da'wah. It's a sign of his trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. When people look at Muslims and they see them the most generous of people, well, people aren't naive, they're not dumb. They have, some insight. They're going to say that this Islam is working at a different level, right? And I saw in an article once I was reading it was about the Bridgeview Mosque in Chicago. Over there, they're very generous, the community. They give a lot, right? And the person writing this article says that the Imam stands up and starts asking for donations. In a matter of 5 minutes or 15 minutes, he gathers $50,000, and bam, that's it. They go back to prayer. And the person is writing it in a way, when a person writes, you can feel their tone, right? He's writing in a way that he's shocked. Like, what the heck just happened? He's shocked, right? $50,000 in a moment. When, by the way, in Ramadan, when they collect for the masjid, they collect $1 to $2 million. Let me just put that out there, right? We in Southern California, let me just say this. Let me be very frank and blunt, because this needs to change if we want to progress, right? People in Southern California, they don't have the culture of generosity. Let me just say that. And I was shocked the first time I did fundraiser here, the first Ramadan I came, right? I started with what? I think $20,000, $25,000. Why? Because it's very normal to start with $25,000 there. And they'll get 4 to 8 people immediately. But here, I had to go down to 5,000 and you get 3 or 4 people. I'm not saying that communities are bad, but that community, although they are overly aggressive, let me just say that, but that community was raised to be generous. And we need to instill this in our own community. Who's taking the money? It's not going to someone's pocket. It's going to the masjid. It's going to these organizations. It's building the community, right? If we do not expand, how are we going to stay up with the generations and the changing of generations? The fact of the matter is everything's technological now. The masjid needs massive upgrades. Let's be very honest, these TVs are ugly. They're terrible. They're not HD, right? These need to be upgraded, right? And of course, and again, please take what I'm saying as, with the best of intention and in a caring manner. It is not, SoCal excels in other aspects, by the way, over Chicago. Chicago is a very immigrant community. Let me just say that. And it's very unfortunate. But in SoCal, it's much more diverse. The diversity you find in masajid, you don't find it in Chicago. Chicago, there's the Arab mosque, the Palestinian mosque, not just the Arab, the Palestinian mosque, right? And then, once you go to the north and west side, it's the Desi mosques. That's how it is, literally. You're entering, it's as if little Palestine and little Pakistan and whatnot. That's how it is. But here in SoCal, I'm very pleased to see the diversity. Look at the group right now. How many ethnicities are here? All right. You have 1, 2 Arabs, 3, 4. I said part of it. Al-Khirfan, the sheep, right? It's beyond the point. I think I got the point across, right? So the generosity, it has a lot to do with our spirituality. We need to be generous in order to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And remember what Imam Ahmad said, the more generous a person is, right, the more loyal they are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the easier it is for them to sacrifice for Allah. If I am ready to sacrifice my wealth, then I am ready to oblige by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. I'm ready to adhere to what I'm saying. I'm ready to sacrifice my food and drink to fast for the sake of Allah. I'm ready to sacrifice, some of my time to learn about Islam. It makes things that much easier because that loyalty is well-founded, well-established. Going on to the next point, generosity shifts the perception of the mind in the way it views the world. And let me give you kind of a prelude to this. The hadith, the well-known hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that lying leads to indecency, fujur. Al-kadhib yahdi lil-fujur, ila al-fujur. Wal-fujur yahdi ila al-nar. ولا يزال المرء يكذب حتى يكتب عند الله كذابا. Lying leads to indecency, and indecency leads to the hellfire. And a person will continue to lie until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes them, gives them a title of a liar. Ibn Qayyim has an interesting explanation of this. He says, what is lying? Lying is about taking reality and twisting it, changing reality. Okay? So for example, so-and-so attended the lecture. Lying would be so-and-so didn't attend the lecture. They're taking reality and changing it. If a person continues to lie, they become someone who lies over and over again. It affects the way they perceive the world. Why? Because now their mind is so accustomed to changing reality. It actually changes in their mind to where they see falsehood as truth and truth as falsehood. This is what Ibn Qayyim rahmatullahi says. So the way we engage, our actions affect our own perception of the world. When a person views the world from the lens of generosity, when they are generous themselves, it does a lot to the mind. Part of which is it belittles the world. It belittles materialism. It looks at the world in a way that you don't have much to offer me. And it reinforces the next life. When we give charity, it was mentioned, we're waiting for the reward. And I'll mention the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah to kind of tie all of this together. We're looking for the reward. If our perception of life, how we engage it, is from the foundation or the lens of generosity, right? This world becomes small in our minds because it's not about this world, right? This world is about investing in the next life. It reinforces our belief in the next life to where we start viewing the world in a way, well, how can I utilize this for my next life? How can I take this and invest it in my next life? And this is the meaning of zuhud, asceticism, it's called in English. Zuhud, what's zuhud? A lot of definitions. The best definition is the definition of Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayh, is that zuhud is not about how much you enjoy life, what type of lifestyle you live, or how much money you have in your bank account. Zuhud is about your wealth being in your hand, not in your heart. Zuhud is about the world, materialism being in your hand and not in your heart. If you lose it, your heart didn't lose anything. And if you have it, it doesn't affect the behavior and your heart. It doesn't do that. When our perception, our goal is generosity. I mean, you could think of it, if you're giving, it's as if you're taking it out of your heart. It puts the materialism in your hand, not in the heart. I have this wealth, my goal is to invest it in my next life. It's in your hand, it's ready to go. Even if you're enjoying it. Uthman ibn Affan was very wealthy. Abdurrahman bin Auf was very wealthy. Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas he had a mansion, right? He had a castle, qasr, right? And most of the 10 who were granted promised paradise were very wealthy. Zubayr ibn Awwam, I calculated how much he left behind. His son, in a hadith, says how much he gave his wife. Zubayr had 4 wives. How much each wife got. Now, in the science of inheritance, when you look at the inheritance, you can tell how much he had based on the portion, right? You can tell. And I calculated it with the earliest value of the dollar, which was 1780, I believe, is the earliest I can find. So calculating inflation and whatnot. Based on then, right, that value, the value of the dollar in 1780, the amount of money as Zubair had was around, it was over $10 billion. Your face is real. Over $10 billion. Back then, not today, back then. Yet he was among the 10 promised paradise. He wasn't promised it for no reason. So it's not about how little money you have, right? It's about where your money is. Generosity helps train our mind and our heart to put materialism here, not here. And it's very problematic when materialism is here. Very problematic, because it becomes a great, battle, internal battle between that and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I love wealth for wealth itself, how am I going to give zakah? If wealth to me is purely this logical thing, right? It's about profit. What capitalism teaches us. Business is about profit, and that's it, right? Regardless of how it affects the greater society. It's about profit. If that's my perception, how on earth am I going to give zakat? It's going to be very hard. Therefore, generosity is kind of a remedy for that. Makes our sacrifice that much easier. It makes sacrificing for the sake of Allah, giving something up for the sake of Allah, that much easier. And the Prophet ﷺ teaches us, "Man taraka shay'an lillah, awadahu Allah khayran min." Whoever leaves something for the sake of Allah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replaces it with something better. Man, is it tasty when you see that in your life. Man, is it such a joy when you see it. To the point where, again, it develops that iman. When you experience it, it makes you want more. When you see how much Allah gives you because you left something for Him or you sacrificed something for Him, you start thinking, you develop this perception, man, what is there that I can sacrifice for the sake of Allah? Because what I'm getting in return is not only amazing, it tastes beautiful. It tastes, so amazingly. SubhanAllah. And in this regard, Aisha radiallahu anha tells of a situation where someone gave her a gift of أنهم ذبحوا شاة فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ما بقي منها قالت ما بقي منها إلا كتفها قال بقي كلها غير كتفها. And this hadith is narrated in Tirmidhi. This is so beautiful. Look how the Prophet ﷺ is so optimistic, right? A sheep was slaughtered and they had a portion of it. So the Prophet ﷺ asked Aisha radiallahu anha, what's left of the sheep? She said that all of it was eaten and what's left is the shoulder. The Prophet ﷺ loved the shoulder the most. So the Prophet ﷺ said, rather, what was left was that which they had given sadaqah. They slaughtered and they gave a lot of it in charity, right? And left the shoulder. So Aisha radiallahu anha said what? All of it is gone except the shoulder. So the Prophet ﷺ said, rather, all of it is with us except the shoulder. Meaning we're the ones who are going to eat the shoulder and that's it. We benefit from it in this life, that's it. However, what we gave in charity, that's what stays with us in the next life. SubhanAllah. Look at the optimism, right? And this leads me to my next point. Generosity builds optimism. Right? It builds optimism. When I am giving, and my motive for giving is that there's reward, that I am hopeful, I'm waiting for something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's part of Iman, is looking for the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's part of Iman. Because again, it develops this love for Him. When our goal is generosity, when we try applying generosity, and because of that, now we are waiting for the blessings to show up in our lives, and we're waiting for the blessings of the next life. It builds this optimism. I'm hopeful. I'm waiting for something good to come. And you can see how the optimism comes in. Rather than, there's nothing good in life. I don't know what my future holds for me. Who knows what's going to happen. I don't know if this job is going to sustain me. I don't know this. I don't know that. It's a very pessimistic lifestyle. And the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from pessimism. وَكَانَ يُعْجِبُهُ الْفَأْلِ. And he used to like optimism. And he gives one example. If he walks and he hears a certain word or a name that is optimistic. So he used to like, Ya Rashid, or one who is guided or who follows guidance. He used to like hearing that because Oh, guidance. I'm going to follow guidance. That's optimism. When the pagan, the delegate from Quraysh came and they had the Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, the Hudaybiyah treatise, right? The guy's name was Sahil. So the Prophet ﷺ said, Sahul al-Amr. Right? Sahil means ease or easy. So when he heard that name, he said, okay, inshallah, this is going to bring us ease, this treatise. Optimism. Look for optimism. Why? Because أَنَا عِنْدَ حُسْنِ ظَنِّ عَبْدِي. I am as my servant thinks of me. If we are always looking at things from an optimistic lens, we are focusing on the good, that which brings us hope, then that hope will automatically start connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we will start seeing that in our lives manifest itself. So the more optimistic we are, the more we will see the blessings in our lives. The more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us, as I mentioned just now. So, what do we gain? What is really going on? And I want to look at it from now a psychological lens, the research. And all these emotions, subhanAllah, these important emotions in Islam, you can do research and find what psychologists say about it. And it's really interesting. It's very interesting. So here are some quotes. What do we gain? So research shows that when we are generous, it causes oxytocin to be released in our brain. Now, oxytocin is what is it called? It's some sort of, I don't know the term, the medical term. Something that is released in our brain, right? What is it? Endorphin, yes, right? It's released in our brain and it gives us a sense of joy, sense of happiness. So when we are generous, when we give, this is being released in our mind and it brings us happiness. So as we are bringing happiness to that person that we are donating to, or that cause that we are donating to, it's also giving us the same exact joy. And on top of that, you get the reward, subhanAllah. Oxytocin connects us to others, and social connections are a powerful way to increase one's own happiness. Again, going back to what I said before, when we donate, we are more likely to donate to a cause we feel that we are a part of. This emotional connection. It builds a society. It builds a community. Right? It builds a culture. I am not just this individual in this massive, meaningless world. Rather, I am part of these groups. And that's important in Islam. Why do we pray in the masjid? Part of it is the communal feeling, building a community. Ramadan, what do we do in Ramadan? We invite our family members, we invite friends. That builds the community. Right? What else? And there's so many examples that's not coming to my mind right now of how Islam emphasizes this doing together. Why? Because it's important to be part of something. It's part of our identity, right? Also, the researchers say that what we are thankful for is important. And subhanAllah, you find these in the books of spirituality, right? Shukr, gratitude, that's important. But what we give others to be thankful for is even more important. What that means is vaguely worded, right? What I believe the author is saying, the researcher is saying, is that being thankful is good, but being thankful by actually doing something with that blessing is even more important. So gratitude in Islam, part of it is with the tongue, saying Alhamdulillah or Ashukru Lillah, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessing. But part of the blessing is using the blessings fi ta'atillah, in obedience with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So gratitude, generosity is not just, it enhances our application of the faith. It takes us, or helps us take gratitude to a different level, to a higher level. Generosity is about applying gratitude and not just saying that which is, a sign of gratitude. Studies show that generosity increases your lifespan. It creates happiness and also a healthy life. SubhanAllah, who would have thought? Generosity increases your lifespan. And what's interesting is what does the Prophet ﷺ say? من أراد أن يطيل بعمره what? فليصل رحمه. Whoever wants to extend their life, then join ties with their kin. And that's a part of generosity, as I'll get to, inshallah, at the end, very shortly. Prophet ﷺ says this. Now, the scholars differ in two opinions. What exactly does that mean? One opinion is that it's literal, that a person's life is extended. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing this before we're created, wrote that down in the Lawh al-Mahfuz. Right? The other opinion is that it's barakah. The blessings are increased. Also, being generous, as I mentioned, there needs to be a motive behind it. There needs to be an emotional connection. And by doing that, it kind of manifests this sensitivity towards other people. Meaning, if we want to be generous, we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the person we are giving or being asked to give to, the cause. It builds this sensitivity. I feel for the other person. And what's interesting is that when we build this sensitivity, it actually improves our own perception of ourselves. We become more sensitive of ourselves. And that helps build identity. It helps build self-esteem. It helps build, our personalities. It's so interesting, subhanAllah. And these things are promoted in Islam. Also, as I mentioned, generosity takes the focus off ourselves, builds confidence, and reduces negative feelings of the self. Part of hopelessness depression. One of the theories is that hopelessness depression is caused when a person is overly negative about themselves and they feel like there's no way out of it. So being overly negative, having poor self-esteem is detrimental to a person's mental health, right? When a person is generous, it's almost as if it's a shield against that. It's telling yourself, you know what? I am someone who sees the world as being greater than myself. I am someone who is impacting the world in a positive manner. And what's interesting, Umar Sulaiman released a study, an article in Yaqeen, the website, about self-esteem among Muslims. And it shows that Muslims who engage in humanitarian efforts have better self-perception of themselves, higher self-esteem. Right? The example is there's a woman, a hijabi lady, who went and helping the homeless. And one of the homeless says, you know what, I always see you women here. She's like, what, excuse me? You women who wear the scarf. I always see you around here. Right? It's a moral builder. It boosts morality. It boosts self-confidence. Hey, you know what? We have a positive impact on the world, and that's important. And I'm running out of time here. Take all of this. This is important. Take all of this, and now listen to the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah that illustrates what generosity is. مثل الذين ينفقون أموالهم في سبيل الله ومثل الذين ينفقون أموالهم ابتغاء مرضات الله وتثبيتا من أنفسهم كمثل جنة بربوة أصابها وابل فآتت أكلها ضعفين فإن لم يصبها وابل فطل. Wallahu bima ta'maluna basir. In this, I don't have time to go into every word and whatnot. This verse illustrates what generosity is, what sadaqah, charity is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the analogy, it is a garden. It is green. And it's not just any garden. It's a garden on top of a mountain. So you have this beautiful view. And being at the highest point means you get the most amount of sunlight and the most amount of rain. And if it rains heavily, the water isn't going to gather there, causing it to be flooded and then destroying the garden. Meaning it is in the most ideal spot. And it's so fruitful. What it produces is twice as much as the other gardens. Generosity puts that in your heart. That greenness, that luscious feeling. The fruits, you feel it, you see it, you enjoy it, you taste it. Right? It gives you such a beautiful perception of life. Being on top of that mountain, you have the best view. That's your perception of life, so optimistic. So this verse is so beautiful. And it truly elaborates what generosity is. And I conclude with this final thing. Generosity isn't just with wealth. Generosity isn't just with wealth. Generosity is also with our time. Spending time with your children is an act of generosity. Spending time with your parents, young ones, is generosity. Spending time in a humanitarian cause is generosity. There's generosity with your words, what you say. You could be generous in what you say, the way you say it. Complimenting someone, that's an act of generosity. Why? Because you're bringing them happiness. Al-ibtisamas, smiling, is an act of generosity. You're offering something to someone that brings them joy and happiness. Your facial expressions and your body expressions. This is also generous, right? And my teacher, here I go, I'll mention him again, right? It's a teacher, right? SubhanAllah. He said that when someone speaks to him, it is that person's right that he listens to them, no matter who they are. That's part of the generosity. Someone speaking to you, it's their right that you listen to them, even if what they're saying is silly. And not be like, oh my God, who's this person? And I have a bad habit of this. Sometimes I start looking around and whatnot. Be generous by looking at showing them that you are paying attention to what they're saying, even if you can't help them, right? At least you say, you know what? I might not be able to help you, but I do care. And give them a dua. You can be generous in the dua you make. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among the generous and inshallah allow us to use our generosity to come closer to Him. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us and to replace all that we have sacrificed for Him. Jazakumullah khair. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.